Hello everyone, welcome to my Midlane Counterpick tier list. This list is aimed at Master Plus, and I'm also streaming the entire thing live on Twitch and on TikTok, so if you want to check me out there, feel free. I think it's important to start, before I start grading champions, by saying that counterpicks, by design, are good if they are easy, because these are not your main champions, right? These are champions that you are picking if you see a really good angle for it. So if a counterpick is like good in a lot of situations, but is really hard to pull off, for example, you know, like something really mechanical like Aurelia, it's probably not going to be a very good counterpick, right? In fact, we'll start with Aurelia. She's not a good counterpick because she is so hard. She does, in fact, crap on a lot of mages, but the amount of work you have to put in to be good on Aurelia comparatively to good on other champions is crazy, which is what makes her a bad counterpick. Obviously, right? It doesn't take a genius to identify that, you know, she's very strong in the mages, but the hands requirement is just not worth it, and there's not a lot of transferable skills, which is kind of the other major thing you want in a counterpick, right? Transferable skills from other champions that might be in your pool. For similar reasons, I don't think Vladimir is a great counterpick. In fact, I haven't put him in very bad counterpick. There's not a lot of drafts that I'm like, wow, this is an amazing Vlad game. I think that's very rare. A lot of Vlad's strength comes from OTPing him, in fact, not from using him as a counterpick. It comes from like game mastery and knowing a bunch of runes and knowing a bunch of setups. And if you don't have that prior experience on Vladimir, you're not going to have a good time. He's just an OTP champ. In fact, I would put this into like OTP tier, where it's like just not a counterpick at all, right? Orianna's not a bad counterpick, but like, why are you using Ori as a counterpick? There's not a lot of like champs that I'm like, wow, Ori. Like Ori is such a good blind pick. It's like, if you're using her extensively as a counterpick, I'd kind of ask why, because she's also quite difficult. You know, she's fun, but she's quite difficult. She dies very easily, and although she does provide, you know, utility, which is very important, she doesn't have that like X factor that I'd want, especially if this is like R5. So, good blind pick, good champion, but like, why are you using Ori as one of your counterpicks? I think Echo is a very good counterpick. Echo is probably the most underrated assassin in League of Legends right now, at least mid lane. I say this all the time, but 2 Qs from level 1 one-shots the wave if you don't want to play aggressively with your E. And if you play aggressively with your E and you're an assassin player, you can just demolish certain champions, like with very little counterplay. People have a very hard time tethering your EQ, even Master Plus. Like, I can speak from experience. And the other thing that makes him so strong is you can change what style you want, you know? You can go Electro TP, you can go Halo Blades Ignite, and, you know, pick your poison. So, a few ways you can play him. I don't think he's stupid mechanically hard. Just overall, a very solid champion. Syndra's a good counterpick, because if you can identify an easy Syndra game and just lock Syndra, you'll have a really fun time. She is probably the easiest control mage Master Plus, comparatively to, you know, Ori and Talia. I think she's quite simple, and her output is very high. Her scaling is really good. So if you can just kind of breeze through an easy Syndra lane, like for example Malzahar, get to mid game, one-shot some people, you'll have a fun time. Malzahar is low-key not a bad counterpick. He is not good, but if you're playing Malzahar into like a really annoying champion, like maybe LeBlanc, hey, it's not bad. If LeBlanc can't really bully you pre-6 and you get your lost chapter, what is she gonna do? Pretty much nothing for the rest of the game. And you have a lot of ability to just kind of say stop to people, like no, do not move forward. That's valuable. He's not a bad counterpick. I do hate on Malzahar a lot, but if you're using him as a counterpick, yeah, I don't have a major issue with it. He's pretty easy, and that's important. Ahri, I'd say Ahri's not a bad counterpick. Kind of similar to Ori, where like, there's not a lot of games that Ahri is going to just demolish a lane. But she's pretty useful when you have a skirmishing team comp. So if you see, hey, my team has a lot of skirmishing, I need a skirmishing champion, Ahri's, you know, pretty simple. She has very clear reference points. Does a good amount of damage. Not the worst scaling. Not a bad counterpick. If you're like, hey, we need skirmishing. Ahri. Skirmishing champ. Galio is a top 5 counterpick. He might be a top 1 counterpick in my opinion. I think Galio is the single best counterpick in the entire game, specifically for mid lane. Because what this champion does is Into AP champions, which is the vast majority of mid laners, he neutralizes incredibly effectively. And if you're in a game where you have dive, like you have a Camille or an Mbessa or a Rakan, something you can press R on top of, your wombo combo potential is unreal. Additionally, if you're ever into like 3+ AP, pick Galio and you'll just be immortal. So, very, very good champion. Just have to be careful about like AD mid laners and like it's actually Rise top and all of a sudden you have to play into like Redacted mid. That's pretty horrible for Galio. Qiyana is just too hard to be a counter pick, honestly. She's just too hard. I don't know if she's closer to Aurelia, where it's just mechanical, or Vladimir, where you need to have like a bunch of like OTP knowledge. It's kind of in the middle. Like, she's too hard. You can't just pick Qiyana in good Qiyana games. You have to pick her in games where it's like a really good, like every game, I guess. You can't just pick her in good games. You have to pick her every game. Or like at least 50% of the games you play have to be Qiyana if you have her in your pool. Morgana is a good counter pick. Very solid. I don't have a lot to say about Morgana mid. I think it's very boring, but it's very effective in the lanes that it's good into. You can shut down certain things like RE Vi. Morgana's quite good into as a neutralizing pick. It's very hard to get punished. Again, I think it's really boring, but if you want a counter pick, Morgana's easy. Lissandra's going to be high. Where is Lissandra? Yeah, I think Lissandra's really good. She's a top 5 counter pick. She's kind of similar to Galio, where she's pretty simple, and she really, really shuts down assassins. So, if you're playing into, you know, a Kali mid, like just blind, or Zed mid, lock in Lissandra, you need limited amounts of games on it, and your output is going to be very high. She's a classic anti-carry. Kind of, not exactly Mage Galio, but similar to Mage Galio. Just not into Swain. Yeah, well, that's why you're using her as a counter pick, right? Speaking of Swain, I do want to give him a shout out. Where is that little guy? I think Swain is the top 5 counter pick. I mean, it's kind of similar to Galio and Lissandra, whereas Galio destroys AP heavy comps, Lissandra like destroys like hyper carry, like melee hyper carry comps and assassins. Swain is just really, really good into melees. Like, if you have a very engage heavy comp, Swain is really good. You will have the issue in Master Plus of people, the second they see you ult, they'll start clicking away instead of fighting in it. But I don't even think that's that big of a deal. If it's a good Swain game, he's not super hard, and you can get a lot of output out of him. Yone goes into Yone tier. He's terrible. He's just way too hard, and he sucks, and he's perma-low win rate. If you want to see me rant about Yone, I plan on making an entire video about why I hate Yone instead of just sprinkling my hatred through random TikToks, so stay tuned for that. I'll call it the Yone dissertation. Azir also goes into Yone tier, although obviously he's above Yone in Yone tier. Azir is terrible. He's just too hard. He's just too hard. He's just pro-skewed, and you shouldn't play him. If you really love these two champions and you want to make them work, pick them, but don't counter-pick them. Use them as, like, your OTP, you know? Like, terrible counter-picks. Horrible, horrible, horrible counter-picks. Diana, like, somewhere in not bad counter-pick. I don't really know where. I feel like, not even, though. I feel like Diana goes into OTP tier. Every Diana player I know is an OTP. Every single one. I know 0 people who have Diana as part of a pool. It's weird. Like, in my head, she's not absurdly hard, and there are certain champions she just shits on, but, like, from what I've actually seen, if you're playing Diana, you're OTPing her. So, yeah, that's kind of my gut feeling, is that she's an OTP champ. Talon, I mean, it's the Qiyana situation. I think maybe he's at the bottom of not bad counterpick, because if you have assassin knowledge, Talon is a very basic assassin. He is quite coin flippy, but if you predict that there's going to be a lot of chaos in a game, Talon's pretty good. You know, I think he is in fact easier than Aurelia and Qiyana, though you will get a lot of benefits out of OTPing him. Pretty good. Anivia is another top 5 counterpick. I don't know if there's something about Anivia or something about these 4 champions. I think it's the fact that each of them are just demolish short-range team comps. So if you have like R5 counterpick as a mid laner and you see full short-range comp, log, you know, Swain or Anivia, and they kind of do the same thing. I think Anivia might even be better than Swain because of just how dominant she is into short-range melee characters, especially if they don't have dashes. Like shit like Garen is having so little fun into Anivia. A mobile AD carries. Can you emphasize why Swain's a good counter pick? Sure. Basically, if you're into, like, short-range team comps, Swain is incredibly easy to pull off, and he is incredibly valuable. So this is basically a tier list of input to output. So how easy is a champion to pick up at a baseline level, followed by how much output will I get from that champion in a good game. So all 4 of these champions are really, really good, which is also why I'm practicing Anivia on an ult, because I think she's so crazy strong. Corki, oh, oops, this is the not mid laners tier. Oh, how is Silas a not mid laner? Silas is definitely mid laner. Speaking of Silas, Silas is a good counter pick. I don't think he's top 5, but like, okay. So Silas is weird because, yes, he is very hard, but good Silas games, like where they have Malphite, or they have, you know, a Mumu or Alistar, are so unbelievably good that if you have the baseline knowledge of how to play your lane and you go even, you can be so strong. Yes, he's very hard. There's definitely an asterisk around this Silas pick, but wow. In a good Silas game, Silas is just crazy strong. Ambessa is not a good counter pick. Not because you can't utilize her effectively, it just is kind of the rule of, like, you need a lot of games on her. It's like, if you don't have 50% of your games at least on Ambessa mid, you're gonna, like, struggle a lot. So, not a good counter pick. Not a champion you should have as your, like, counter pick slot in your pool. Aurora's not a bad counter pick. Kind of similar to Aura. No. I'll put her at the bottom of good counter picks, because the difference between Ahri and Aurora is that Ahri doesn't stomp as many lanes as Aurora does. Like, if you're picking Aurora into stuff like Yone and Yasuo, you're going to have a really, really good time. So, and I think they are similar levels of difficulty. I'd say Aurora is harder, but not significantly enough. So, bottom of good counter pick. The thing that's preventing me from putting her higher is, I think there are fewer lanes that, in fewer games where Aurora just, like, completely shits on the game, you still have to have a very good level of, like, game understanding to win on her. Malphite. So Malphite was previously in, like, the not a mid laner tier, but I kind of want to put him in good counter pick. Because if you see a full AD team comp, it's a very specific situation, but if you see a full AD team comp, you can just pick Malphite. And it's not hard to pilot, and you're completely Thanos. It's not super common. It's pretty rare. But, like, it's really good. If you see they have, like, Akshan mid, and then 4 other AD champs, you're just like, hey, give me Malphite, and you're completely unkillable. It's one of the best feelings in the game. Neeko is not a bad counter pick, but she's not really a mid laner, unfortunately. Yeah, she's not a good counter pick for different reasons, just because Neeko isn't a great mid laner. And she's weird enough that you kind of have to play a lot of Neeko games, in my opinion. But I don't think she's in the same tier as Ambessa. I'll put her at bottom of not bad. She's just a weird champion, unfortunately. I think she's kind of held back by her being so viable in the support role. Zillian's a good counter pick. Not a good mid laner. Not a good mid laner at all. But a fantastic counter pick. He does a lot if you have a hyper carry jungler and can get through your lane. But again, you have to kind of know how to play Zillion. He's weird. But, man, if you're playing Zillion in, like, a lane where you just go even and then you're speeding up your Viego, crazy combos you can do. Like, Zillion Kindred, lots of fun stuff. I don't think Zoe's a good counter pick, because she's just hard. I think this is one of the hardest champions in the game. Super underrated in terms of difficulty. You just are not good enough at Zoe to utilize her as an effective counterpick. Like, obviously, if you're playing Zoe into stuff like Talia, it's going to be fun, but you still have to be good at Zoe to, like, close out the game. So, not an effective counterpick. Veigar is a good counterpick. I don't know where in good counterpick, but it's just easy lane. Like, you know, maybe Ahri isn't even that bad for Veigar because the cage is pretty annoying for her. And, like, they don't have that much, like, dive threat. Veigar's golden. Because of how well he scales and how easy he is. So, there's a lot of output for the input you need to put in. Kassadin... He's not bad. Obviously, if you're playing him into, like, full AP team comps, like, you know, you're going to have a great time. But the issue with Kassadin is just that Galio kind of does a similar thing to he does, and I think Galio's more useful. I think Kassadin is not a super useful champ, and he's like leaning towards the OTP tier stuff, so just play Galio. Xerath's a fine counter pick. I'll put him at the very, very bottom of good counter pick. What's holding me back on Xerath is simply that he is so killable. Even in good Xerath games, even if it's a good lane, he is so easy to just kill. But if you can bully lanes, they don't have a lot of dive, you know, he's fine. I just think he's like harder because he's all skill shots, and the more I talk about it, the more I want to put him in not bad, because he's all skill shots. Yes, there can be a lot of output, but you have to be good at him. Seraphine's not a bad counter pick. It's kind of an easy lane into if I don't get demolished in sides, my team fighting is degenerate, but that's really hard. Like, there's not a lot of games where those conditions are going to be met. Maybe if you're playing into, like, Malzahar mid, you can pick Seraphine, but again, she's easy enough. I think she's not bad. But, like, I wouldn't use her extensively as a counter pick. Brand's not a good counter pick, just because I don't think there's... Yes, he's easy, but I don't think there's enough game states. I'm like, wow, Brand mid really fixes this comp. He's a case of, like, wow, I'm picking Brand. What am I actually getting? And the answer is kind of not that much, and you're still vulnerable to ganks. And even if they don't have a lot of gank threat, there's just other champions that do more. So, kind of just whatever champion. I don't think he's a great mid laner. Zed's too hard to be a counter pick. In fact, I'm gonna put him in OTP because similar to Kiana and Aurelia, he's really, really, really hard mechanically. And similar to Diana and Vladimir, you need to have a lot of matchup knowledge. In fact, I might even just put all these champions in OTP the more I think about it, because you basically need like 50% of your games in all of them. So I think I'm being a little bit too kind to them by saying they're just not good. Now, they're definitely like OTP status champs, or at least 2-trick. Lux is a good counter pick. Lux is an underrated mid laner, I think. Not a lot of people play her, but her ability to just delete any wave she wants, no matter what, free get out of jail free card, and then she can just rotate and pack sides. Not like she's the best roaming champion in the game, but you can have a lot of tempo by just deleting a wave and then, you know, camping in a side lane brush. I think Neferi is significantly easier than these assassins, so I'm going to put her in good counter pick. Kind of like AD Echo, in a way. I think I need to move Morgana. Morgana's very good. She's kind of like AD Echo. I think she's harder than Echo, but I think her output's a lot higher if you're good at her. And I think a lot of people now kind of expect Neferi to be a jungler or top laner. Their first thought isn't Neferi mid. So you have that flex potential kind of similar to Echo. Again, very good champion. I don't see her a lot. She's very unpopular, but when I do see her, she seems quite strong. It's just, I don't think a lot of people play her, weirdly enough. LeBlanc is not a good counter pick. She's not quite OTP status, but she's very similar to Zoe, where like you need a lot of games on LeBlanc to be good at LeBlanc and actually pull off LeBlanc in an actual game. And she's just so hard, and she's so specific. She's not the best blind. She's not the best counter pick. She's kind of one of those like 2-trick champs. Like, you pick LeBlanc in really good LeBlanc games, but you need to have her played in like 50% of games to like maintain that muscle memory. I think Annie's a good counter pick. Master Plus, I don't think she's fun. I think she's really boring. Boring as Sin Champion. But her engage is really easy. You can just kind of go forward and people die. If you're solo AP, you'll have fun. That's it. Twisted Fate is a good counter pick. If you see, hey, easy lane, and hey, I have a strong jungler that needs some setup and doesn't provide much CC, Twisted Fate is the perfect pairing, and I don't think he's super hard. Is he super easy? No, but again, if you're just using him as a Malzahar counter pick, you'll have fun. Fizz, OTP champ, okay, he's not quite OTP champ, but he's definitely not a good counter pick. I just don't think Fizz is a great mid laner Master Plus, and that's kind of the truth of it. Kog'Maw is a very good counter pick. People do not get Kog'Maw mid. Just try it. I don't care what build you go. Dusk and Dawn into Nashers or Dusk and Dawn into Rageblade. But this champion is disgusting. You just have to try him. Just pick him in a good Kog'Maw game, like a Kog'Maw mid game where they don't have a lot of threat and it's a free low lane, you know, maybe into Aurelion Soul, and you'll have fun. You'll have a lot of fun. Victor. I think Victor is a slightly better counter pick than Orianna. Again, I think there's not that many games I'm like, wow, Victor completely slams here. But there are enough of them that I think I'm going to put him at the bottom of good counter picks. Because, like, if you pick a weak laner, for example, Seraphine, Victor slams it. If you pick low dive, Victor slams it. But he's just such a good blind as well. It's like, I wouldn't have him in a pool extensively as a counter pick, but because, you know, he's a fairly standard control mage, you know, a lot of fundamentals do transfer. Hui is not a good counter pick. I just don't think he's a great mid laner. He's a much better blind than he is a counter pick. If you need like a stable pick, Hui is good, but I don't think Hui is ever going to completely swing a game on an R5 counter pick. There's obviously good Hui games, like, you know, where you have a lot of poke and you need, like, some follow-up, but I just don't think the output is there for the input you have to put in. I think Vel'Koz is just too hard to be a counter pick. He's kind of like Zoe. I just think he's too hard. He's not quite OTP tier, but also the only people I see who play Vel'Koz are OTPs. I don't see anyone have Vel'Koz in like a pool. You know, like, it's very, very rare. Most Vel'Koz players I know are like 2 tricks. So maybe for similar Vladimir-related reasons, I'm going to put him in OTP. If only because every Vel'Koz player I know is an OTP. He also is an OTP champ. He is a good counter pick, but that's only because if you're an OTP and you're picking him in a good game, you're going to do very well, but he is like the definition of an OTP champ. I don't think that needs any explanation. Taliyah is not a good counter pick because she is very hard. I think the like baseline level to pilot Taliyah is much higher than other control mages. Once you get those like initial 70 games down, she goes into not bad counter picks. So I'm putting her at the top of not good counter pick with the understanding that you haven't gotten like 80 Taliyah games in. But once you get over the initial Taliyah hump, perfectly fine control mage, but that first hump is really hard for Taliyah to get over. Again, very good with skirmishing champions, very good with stuff like Xin Zhao and Jarvan, very bad into stuff that outranges her, like Orianna. But she's just too weird to be a good counter pick unless you have prior knowledge of what the champion does. Vex is not a bad counter pick. I'm not a really big Vex believer, but as far as using her exclusively as a counter pick, I don't think it's the worst idea. She is pretty easy, and there are certain games where I'm like, wow, this is a good Vex angle. You know, they have like a lot of dashes you can interrupt. It's pretty annoying. You have a dive comp. Stuff like that makes it so that Vex has a much easier time playing the game. Katarina is an OTP champion. I don't need to go over this. Katarina is like the most OTP champion in the entire game. Very similar to Yasuo, you have to OTP this champion. I think Akshan is a little bit too hard to use as a great counter pick. He's fine, but you really should be 2-tricking him, I think. Very good 2-trick champ, not a very good counter pick champ, but not, like, terrible. Just fine. Ziggs is kind of like Xerath with more mobility, so I'm going to just place him higher than Xerath. He is very, very similar, but he has more mobility, so I think that makes him better. I will note that Ziggs is kind of better as a bot laner. That sucks. What can you do about it, though? Cassio is an OTP champ, basically, or a 2-trick champ. She is not a good counter pick because of how hard she is. Like, every Cassio player I see is an OTP or a 2-trick. It is what it is. The champion is just too hard, in my opinion, to use as a consistent pick. Aurelion Sol is a good counter pick. If you can pick him into Malzahar or, you know, other kind of easy lanes that can't really hard bully you, you'll scale absurdly hard. Kind of the vibe with a lot of scaling champions like Veigar and Aurelion Sol is easy lane, they don't have a lot of dive, you can get through lane fast, not super mechanically difficult. Pretty good counter pick. Karma is not a bad counter pick. I don't think she's a great mid laner, but as far as enchanter mids go, she's definitely better than Seraphine by a fair margin. If only because I think there's more games that Karma is good. I don't think she's a consistent mid laner, but if you want to play an enchanter and you want to use her as extensively as a counter pick, you'll have a fine time. You really want to pick her when you have like a hyper carry jungle and support, or a hyper carry jungle and bot lane, excuse me, and you kind of just have a second support mid. Maybe if you have something like a mage support already and you just kind of need something more supportive mid lane, Karma can be fine. And again, she's easy, so the input's quite low and the output can be good, but I wouldn't play her personally. Akali is the very bottom of not a bad counter pick. She is quite hard. You should two-trick her, but I know enough people that play Akali in a pool that I'm like gonna be a little bit more forgiving here. And the benefit of Akali is even though the input's quite high, the output is absurd. She has so much outplay potential, but I wouldn't use her as only a counter pick. You can though, and I don't think she's the worst. She's kind of similar to Talon, honestly. I think a little bit more mechanically demanding than Talon is, but Talon has a little bit more map play you can do. Finally, Ryze is not a good counter pick because you need a lot of Ryze games to play Ryze, and I just don't believe in this champion and his viability, Master Plus. I think there's other champions that do very similar things to him, and yeah, I'm just not a Ryze believer. So yeah, I think that is my full counterpick tier list. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments, and I will see you around. Okay, I just realized I didn't finish my top 5 counter picks. I'm going to quickly promote Morgana. I feel like this champion is a really underrated counter pick. If you are in a game where you need to deny engage, Morgana is almost second to none, and she is also very easy while having very good output. So that's my final top 5, and now the video is for realsies done. No more April Fool's pranks. Have a great day.